You know what nobody wants to admit? The people running the world aren't actually that special. They're not smarter than you, they didn't work harder than you, and they definitely don't have some secret knowledge that makes them untouchable. But here's what they do have. They understand how power actually works. And I'm not talking about the fairy tale version we're sold about meritocracy and hard work paying off. I'm talking about the real mechanics of influence, leverage, and control that operate behind closed doors while the rest of us are busy following the rules they wrote. And here's the thing that's going to piss some people off. One guy with no money, no connections, and no Ivy League degree figured this out and used it to gain power over some of the most influential people on the planet. He didn't do it through innovation or brilliance. He did it by recognizing that elite power structures have a fatal weakness, and that weakness is the elites themselves. Now, before you click away thinking this is just another conspiracy video, let me be clear about what we're actually going to cover here. This isn't about worshipping some mastermind or glorifying manipulation. This is about understanding the actual playbook that was used, stripping away the sensationalism, and recognizing the patterns that exist in every power structure you'll ever encounter. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The same strategies that allowed one person to infiltrate and control elite circles are being used right now in your industry, your company, maybe even your friend group. The scale is different, but the mechanics are identical. And if you don't understand how this works, you're vulnerable to it. But if you do understand it, you can protect yourself, recognize it when it's happening, and maybe even use some of these principles ethically to advance your own life. Here's what makes this story so valuable to study. It's a masterclass in strategic relationship building that went horrifically wrong. Strip away the crimes, and what you're left with is someone who understood social dynamics, information leverage, and network effects better than almost anyone in modern history. He turned parent-teacher conferences into job interviews. He converted academic conferences into billionaire matchmaking services. He transformed personal relationships into professional assets, and vice versa. And the crazy part? None of this required genius-level intellect or special talents. It required shamelessness, consistency, and a willingness to see opportunities where others saw boundaries. So the question we're going to answer today isn't just how did this happen? It's what can we learn from this that's actually applicable to our own lives without becoming monsters in the process? Here's the thing about power that nobody really tells you. It's not about what you know, it's about who knows that you know. And this guy, he figured that out way earlier than most people ever will. See, while everyone else was busy trying to climb the ladder, the traditional way, getting degrees, working their way up through corporate hierarchies, he was studying a completely different playbook. He wasn't born into wealth, didn't have family connections opening doors, and honestly, he didn't even finish college. But what he did have was something far more valuable. He understood that elite circles aren't actually that hard to penetrate if you know the right pressure points. Think about it like this. Every exclusive club has a back door, and while everyone's fighting to get through the front entrance, the smart money's on finding that side door that nobody's watching. The first move he made was borderline genius, and it's something you could literally apply tomorrow if you wanted to. He got a job teaching at a prestigious private school, not because he was passionate about education, but because he knew exactly who sent their kids there. We're talking about the children of CEOs, hedge fund managers, politicians, people who wouldn't normally give him the time of day. But here's where it gets interesting. Parent-teacher conferences became his personal networking events. While other teachers were discussing homework and grades, he was planting seeds, asking the right questions, making himself memorable. One parent he connected with was a CEO at a major financial firm. And before you know it, he's transitioning from teaching algebra to managing millions. That's not luck, that's strategy. He turned a $40,000 a year teaching gig into a launchpad for accessing the kinds of people most folks only see on Forbes lists. Now you might be thinking, okay, but not everyone can just become a teacher at an elite school. And you're right, but you're missing the broader lesson here. What he understood was the concept of proximity. You don't need to be equal to someone to access them. You just need to be useful. Think about your own life for a second. Who are the people you interact with regularly that have access to opportunities you don't? Your dentist might play golf with local business owners. Your gym trainer might work with executives. Your kid's soccer coach might know parents who run companies. The point isn't to be manipulative. It's to recognize that access is everywhere. You're just not looking at it the right way. This guy saw a parent-teacher conference and thought, how can I turn this 5-minute conversation into a 5-year relationship? Most people see the same situation and think, I hope little Timmy's doing okay in math. What made his approach different from regular networking was the shamelessness of it all. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean he genuinely did not care about social norms that hold most people back. There's this unwritten rule that you're not supposed to mix professional advancement with personal relationships, right? Like you're not supposed to use your kids' school events to hunt for job opportunities. But why not? Who made that rule? Probably the same people who are already on the inside and don't want more competition. He recognized that the wealthy and powerful have their own set of rules, and those rules don't include being polite and waiting your turn. When you're outside looking in, playing by the official rules is just a guaranteed way to stay outside. So he rewrote them. He turned every interaction into a potential opportunity, every conversation into a chess move. Here's something that'll blow your mind when you really think about it. The elite aren't actually that elite when it comes to their decision making. They're just people, and people are incredibly predictable. They respond to flattery, they appreciate being made to feel important, and they absolutely love being around people who make their lives easier. This is where he separated himself from everyone else trying to break in. He didn't approach these connections asking for handouts or acting desperate. Instead, he positioned himself as someone who could solve problems. Got a wealthy client who's bored and wants to feel intellectually stimulated? He'd connect them with fascinating academics. Know someone who wants to break into a new market? He's got contacts overseas. Need an introduction to someone in media? He went to a TED conference last month and has 3 speakers' numbers. Suddenly, he's not some outsider begging for scraps. He's the guy who knows a guy, and that's infinitely more valuable. The financial world he entered was perfect for this kind of operation because it literally rewards you for bringing in wealthy clients. Back in the 70s and 80s, entertaining clients wasn't just accepted, it was expected. If you were a banker or financial advisor, your job was to wine and dine potential clients, show them a good time, make them feel special, and he took this to another level entirely. While other financial professionals were taking clients to nice dinners and golf courses, he was thinking bigger. Private jets, exclusive parties, introductions to celebrities, access to experiences that money usually can't buy. And here's the kicker. A lot of this didn't even cost him that much early on, because he was leveraging other people's resources. He'd connect Person A's private island with Person B's desire for exclusivity, and suddenly everyone thinks he's the one providing these incredible experiences. It's like being a club promoter, but for billionaires. But let's pause here and talk about something crucial that most people miss when they study power dynamics. The accumulation of influence isn't linear, it's exponential. When he started, making one connection took enormous effort. He had to hustle, strategize, position himself perfectly. But that first connection led to 2 more, which led to 4 more, which led to 8 more. This is compound interest, but for relationships. Every person he added to his network increased the value of his entire network because he could now connect people across different industries, different countries, different social circles. Think about your own LinkedIn connections for a minute. If you've got 500 random connections, that's not particularly useful. But if you've got 50 highly targeted connections, who each know 50 other influential people, and you're the person who can introduce them to each other, now you've got real power. He understood this decades before social media made it obvious. The other element that's absolutely critical to understand is timing. He entered the financial world at a moment when it was exploding with new money and fewer regulations. The 80s and 90s were essentially the Wild West of finance, where if you could convince someone you knew what you were doing, you could manage their millions. There wasn't the same level of scrutiny, background checks, compliance requirements that exist today. So his lack of traditional credentials wasn't the red flag it would be now. But here's what's universally applicable. Every industry has its Wild West moment. Crypto had one a few years ago. AI is having one right now. Social media had one in the early 2010s. The people who gain outsized influence are the ones who recognize these moments and move fast before the barriers go up. He saw an opening where traditional credentialing mattered less than personality and connections, and he absolutely ran through that door. Now, something that needs to be said is that not all of his early connections were nefarious. That's actually important to understand, because it reveals how power accumulation really works. A lot of his early networking was just standard, albeit aggressive, professional development. He was good at his job, he brought in clients, he made people money. The problematic stuff came later, but it was built on a foundation of legitimate success. This is why it's so hard to untangle these networks once they're established. You've got people who worked with him purely on professional terms, people who attended his parties but didn't engage in anything illegal, people who benefited from introductions he made without knowing the full picture. The network itself becomes so valuable that even when warning signs appear, there's enormous incentive to look the other way, because severing that connection means losing access to dozens or hundreds of other valuable contacts. And this is where things get really interesting, because once you've established yourself as a connector, as someone who can open doors and make introductions, you start to notice patterns that others don't see. You realize that despite all their wealth and power, these elite individuals are actually incredibly isolated. They can't trust most people because everyone wants something from them. They can't have normal friendships because the power dynamics are too skewed. They attend the same events, vacation in the same places, and interact with the same few hundred people year after year. So when someone comes along who seems to genuinely understand their world, who can facilitate connections without immediately asking for something in return, who makes their lives more interesting, they let that person in. And once you're in, once you're trusted, once you're seen as one of them, even if you're not, well, that's when the real power starts to accumulate. And that's exactly what happened next. So now he's got his foot in the door, he's got some money flowing, and more importantly, he's got access to people who matter. But here's where most people plateau. They get comfortable, they stick with what works, and they never push beyond their initial circle. Not this guy. He understood something fundamental about power. It's not just about having connections, it's about having the right mix of connections across different worlds. See, if you only know bankers, you're just another banker. If you only know politicians, you're just another lobbyist. But if you know bankers and politicians and academics and media executives and foreign dignitaries, now you're something else entirely. You become the bridge between worlds that don't normally interact, and that's where real influence lives. Think about it. Who's more valuable? The person who knows 10 people in one industry, or the person who knows 2 people in 10 different industries? The second person becomes indispensable because they're the only one who can make certain introductions happen. The expansion strategy he employed is something you can literally map out like a business plan, and honestly, more people should. He started in finance, which gave him money and access to wealthy individuals, but he didn't stop there. He started attending academic conferences, not because he had any groundbreaking research to present, but because academics have prestige without money, and his wealthy contacts wanted prestige. So he'd host dinners where Nobel Prize winners would sit next to hedge fund managers, and suddenly, everyone's getting what they want. The academic gets funding for their research or a lucrative consulting gig. The billionaire gets to feel intellectually validated and tell people at parties about their fascinating conversation with a renowned scientist. And him? He's the one who made it happen, which means both parties now owe him. This is social arbitrage at its finest. You're not creating value out of thin air. You're just recognizing that value exists in different forms for different people, and you're facilitating the exchange. Here's a specific example of how this played out in practice. And pay attention, because this same principle works at any level. Let's say you've got a tech billionaire who's made all his money, but feels culturally irrelevant. He wants to be taken seriously in intellectual circles, maybe get invited to exclusive salons where real ideas are discussed. On the other side, you've got a brilliant philosopher or neuroscientist who's done groundbreaking work but is stuck in academia, making $80,000 a year and struggling to fund their research. Normally, these two people would never meet. They don't attend the same events, they don't move in the same circles, they probably don't even know the other exists. But if you're the connector, you arrange for them to meet at an intimate dinner party. The billionaire gets access to genuine intellectual credibility. The academic gets a patron who can fund a decade of research with pocket change. Both of them walk away thinking you're brilliant for making this happen. And the best part? It didn't cost you anything except the knowledge that both of these people existed and wanted something the other could provide. Now let's talk about information asymmetry, because this is where things get really powerful and, frankly, kinda dark. When you're connected to people across different industries and social circles, you end up knowing things that others don't. You hear about deals before they're announced. You know who's struggling financially before it becomes public. You understand political shifts before they hit the news. And in the wrong hands, this information becomes leverage. Think about how insider trading works. It's not about being smarter than everyone else. It's about knowing something before everyone else knows it. But information leverage goes way beyond just financial markets. If you know that politician A is having financial troubles, and you also know that corporation B would benefit from a specific regulation, you can become the middleman who solves both problems. You're not technically doing anything illegal, you're just facilitating a connection. But that connection creates dependency, and dependency is just another word for power. The parties he hosted became legendary, and there's a specific reason why. They weren't just social gatherings, they were strategic networking events disguised as fun. Imagine you're attending one of these events. You walk in, and there's a former president talking to a Hollywood director, a tech CEO discussing AI with a leading researcher, a member of European royalty laughing with a media mogul. The atmosphere is relaxed, exclusive, and filled with people you'd never normally have access to. And in this environment, guards come down. People aren't in business mode. They're relaxed, they're drinking, they're trying to impress each other with stories and ideas. This is when real information flows. Someone mentions they're looking to invest in a new sector. Another person complains about a regulatory headache they're facing. Someone else drops a hint about an upcoming merger. And he's moving through the room, listening, remembering, connecting dots that no one else even knows exist. But here's something crucial that separates smart networking from what he was doing. Documentation. And this is where things crossed from clever into calculated. There's evidence suggesting that many of these gatherings were recorded, photographed, documented in ways that guests didn't fully realize or consent to. Now, why would someone do this? Because in elite circles, reputation is everything. These are people who've spent decades building public images, and anything that contradicts that image becomes a vulnerability. It doesn't even have to be illegal activity. Maybe it's just a married politician being a little too friendly with someone who isn't their spouse. Maybe it's a CEO talking about a deal before it's public. Maybe it's someone expressing opinions that would damage their brand if they went public. When you have documentation of these moments, you don't even need to explicitly threaten anyone. The implication is enough. People start doing favors, making introductions, providing opportunities, all because there's an unspoken understanding that it's better to keep you happy than to risk becoming your enemy. Let's break down the psychology of why this works so effectively, because understanding this can actually help you recognize when it's being used on you. Humans are incredibly loss-averse. We're more motivated to avoid losing something than we are to gain something of equal value. So if someone has the ability to take away your reputation, your marriage, your career, your public image, that's a much stronger motivator than someone offering you money or opportunities. This is why blackmail, even implied blackmail, is so effective. You're not creating a new incentive, you're threatening to destroy existing value. And the beautiful thing, from the perspective of someone wielding this power, is that you don't even have to be explicit about it. You don't have to say, do this or I'll release these photos. You just have to make sure the person knows you have the photos, and their own imagination does the rest of the work. They start self-policing. They start volunteering favors. They start bringing you opportunities because keeping you happy feels safer than risking your displeasure. The network effects of this strategy are absolutely insane when you map them out. Let's say you have compromising information on 10 people. Each of those 10 people has access to maybe 50 other influential individuals through their own networks. Suddenly, you've got indirect influence over 500 people without ever meeting most of them. Because if you need an introduction to someone, one of your 10 compromised contacts can make it happen. If you need a deal to go through, someone in that network of 500 can facilitate it. If you need information, someone knows someone who knows. This isn't theoretical. This is exactly how intelligence agencies operate, and it's exactly how he operated. The difference is that intelligence agencies are theoretically working in national interest, while he was building a private empire of influence that served his own interests and the interests of people who played ball with him. Now, here's where it gets even more complex, and this is something most people don't want to think about. A lot of the people in this network probably weren't doing anything wrong, at least not initially. They met him at a conference, they attended a party, they got a useful introduction, they saw him as a well-connected financier who threw great events. Maybe they noticed some red flags, maybe things seemed a little off, but the benefits of staying connected outweighed the discomfort of asking too many questions. This is how these networks persist, even when warning signs appear. The social and professional cost of extraction is higher than the moral discomfort of looking the other way. And this creates a kind of collective willful blindness where everyone has a vested interest in maintaining the status quo because everyone benefits from the network's existence. It's like being part of a company where you know something unethical is happening in another department, but your job and your mortgage depend on the company's success. So you just focus on your work and try not to think about it. And this brings us to the really uncomfortable truth about how power perpetuates itself in elite circles. It's not usually through explicit conspiracy or coordinated evil. It's through thousands of individual decisions where people choose personal benefit over moral clarity. It's through the accumulation of favors owed and secrets kept. It's through the recognition that speaking up means losing access, losing opportunities, losing status. So people stay quiet, they make excuses, they rationalize. I didn't see anything illegal, I was only there for professional reasons, I had no idea what else was going on. And maybe that's even true for many of them. But the cumulative effect is a network that protects itself, that closes ranks, that prioritizes the preservation of the system over justice or accountability. And once you understand this dynamic, once you see how it works, you start recognizing it everywhere. It's not unique to this one case. It's the operating system of elite power structures worldwide, which raises an even bigger question. If the network was this extensive, this interconnected, this mutually dependent, what happens when the person at the center of it all is suddenly removed? Building a network is one thing, but maintaining it? That's where most people fail. You can make 100 connections at conferences, collect business cards, add people on LinkedIn, but if you're not actively maintaining those relationships, they decay. They become stale. People forget about you. And this guy? He understood that network maintenance is a full-time job that requires systematic effort. From what we've seen in the released files, he was sending and responding to thousands of emails, making calls, arranging meetings, facilitating introductions constantly. This wasn't passive. This was active relationship management at an industrial scale. Think about your own contacts for a second. How many people do you know who could help you with something important, but you haven't talked to them in months or years? The relationship still technically exists, but it's dormant. He made sure nothing went dormant. Every connection was kept warm, every relationship was maintained with regular contact, and that consistent presence is what separated his network from everyone else's Rolodex. The email communications that have been made public are actually fascinating from a psychological standpoint, and they reveal a lot about how influence maintenance actually works. Most of his messages weren't about business deals or compromising activities, they were about mundane stuff. Jokes, articles he thought someone would find interesting, checking in about someone's kid's graduation, remembering birthdays, congratulating people on achievements. This is Relationship Maintenance 101, and it works because it makes people feel valued. When someone remembers details about your life and checks in regularly, you develop affection for them. It's not manipulation in the traditional sense, it's just being a good friend, except it's being strategically applied across hundreds of relationships simultaneously. And here's the thing that's actually kind of sad when you think about it. A lot of these elite individuals probably didn't have many people in their lives who treated them like normal humans. Everyone wanted something. Everyone was transactional. So when someone reached out just to share a dumb joke or ask how they're doing, that felt genuine, even if it was part of a larger strategy. Let's talk about the concept of reciprocity, because this is fundamental to how these networks stay intact. There's a principle in psychology called the reciprocity norm, which basically means humans feel obligated to return favors. If I do something nice for you, you feel like you owe me, and the more I do for you, the more you owe me. Now multiply this across hundreds of relationships over decades. Every introduction he made, every problem he solved, every favor he did, created a debt. And these weren't small favors, these were career-making introductions, multi-million-dollar deals, access to opportunities that people had been chasing their entire lives. So when he needed something, when he asked for a favor in return, how do you say no? You can't, or at least you feel like you can't, because the social and professional cost of refusing someone who's done so much for you feels too high. This is how leverage compounds over time. It's not about one big favor, it's about 1,000 small ones that create an overwhelming sense of obligation. The frequency of contact is something that gets overlooked, but it's actually critical. There's this concept in marketing called top-of-mind awareness, which means that the brand or person you think of first when you need something in a category. If you need a financial advisor, who do you think of first? If you need an introduction to someone in media, whose number do you call? If you're planning an exclusive event, who do you invite? By maintaining constant contact, by being present in people's inboxes and phone calls regularly, he ensured he was always top of mind. This is why successful salespeople send regular newsletters, why good networkers do monthly check-ins, why smart professionals stay visible even when they don't need anything. Because when opportunity arises or when someone needs help, they think of the person they heard from most recently. He was in people's heads constantly, not through aggressive self-promotion, but through consistent, valuable presence. Now here's something that's going to sound counterintuitive, but it's absolutely true. The more powerful your network becomes, the less you actually have to do to maintain it. This is because the network starts maintaining itself through mutual interest. Once you've connected enough people who benefit from knowing each other, they have a vested interest in keeping you happy because you're the hub that makes everything work. Think of it like a wheel. If you're the center and everyone else is a spoke, removing you collapses the entire structure. So people start proactively doing favors for you, offering opportunities, bringing you information, not because you asked, but because they recognize that keeping the hub strong keeps their own connection strong. This is self-reinforcing power, and it's incredibly difficult to dismantle because everyone in the network benefits from its continuation. Even people who might have moral objections to certain aspects have practical reasons to maintain their position within it. The role of exclusivity in network maintenance can't be overstated. These weren't open events that anyone could attend. This wasn't a public platform where anyone could request access. The entire system worked because it was exclusive, because being included meant you were special, important, worthy, and exclusivity creates its own form of pressure. If you're invited to these gatherings, if you're part of this network, speaking out or disconnecting means you're excluding yourself from something valuable. It's the same psychology that keeps people in exclusive clubs, elite organizations, or even toxic friend groups. The fear of being on the outside is stronger than the discomfort of staying on the inside, and he leveraged this brilliantly. People stayed connected, not just because of what they'd gained, but because of what they'd lose by leaving. Access, opportunities, status, connections, all of it would disappear if they stepped away or spoke up. Let's talk about something that makes people really uncomfortable. The majority of people in this network probably aren't criminals. They're not bad people in any conventional sense. They're professionals who made calculated decisions to prioritize their careers and social standing over asking difficult questions. And this is actually the most important lesson here because it reveals how systems like this persist. It's not because hundreds of people are actively engaged in wrongdoing. It's because hundreds of people are passively choosing not to investigate what they suspect might be wrong. This is what Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil. It's not dramatic villains twirling mustaches, it's ordinary people making ordinary decisions to look after their own interests. And when you multiply those individual decisions across an entire network, you get a system that protects itself automatically, without anyone explicitly conspiring to do so. The communication patterns reveal another crucial element: accessibility. Despite being connected to some of the busiest, most time-constrained people on the planet, he was remarkably responsive. This matters because busy, important people are used to being ignored, having their messages deprioritized, waiting for callbacks. So when someone actually responds quickly, actually makes them feel like a priority, that's noteworthy. It builds loyalty. There's a famous quote that says, "Everyone wants to feel important," and it's absolutely true. CEOs, politicians, celebrities, they're all just humans who want to feel valued and heard. By being consistently available, by responding to messages promptly, by making people feel like they mattered to him, he created emotional bonds that went beyond transactional relationships. People genuinely liked him, or at least they liked how he made them feel, and that emotional connection is far more powerful than any contractual obligation. Here's where things get really dark, and it's important to understand this mechanism because it's how abuse systems perpetuate themselves. Once someone is compromised, once they've done something that could damage them if exposed, they become invested in the system's survival. It's not just that they're being blackmailed, it's that they're now complicit. They can't speak out without implicating themselves. They can't push for investigation without risking their own exposure. So they become active participants in maintaining the cover-up, not necessarily because they want to, but because their own survival depends on the system's survival. This is how institutions protect abusers, how corporate scandals stay hidden, how political corruption persists. It's not one person keeping secrets, it's dozens or hundreds of people who all have something to lose if the truth comes out. And each person who becomes complicit makes the system stronger, because now there's one more person with a vested interest in keeping things quiet. And this brings us to perhaps the most unsettling realization of all. Systems like this don't really end just because one person is removed. The network still exists. The connections are still there. The mutual obligations, the shared secrets, the collective interest in maintaining the status quo, none of that disappears. What changes is the structure, the hub, the person at the center, but the incentives that kept people connected, the benefits they derive from the network, the risks they face if things unravel, all of that remains. So the real question isn't just how one man gained power over elites, it's how elite power structures protect themselves, even after individual bad actors are exposed. Because if you're paying attention to what's happening now, years after everything came to light, you'll notice something interesting. A lot of people are working very hard to minimize their connections, rewrite their involvement, and ensure that the full extent of the network never becomes public. And that's exactly what you'd expect from a system that's still protecting itself, even without its original architect. Which makes you wonder what else we still don't know, and more importantly, what we're never meant to find out. You know what nobody wants to admit? The people running the world aren't actually that special. They're not smarter than you, they didn't work harder than you, and they definitely don't have some secret knowledge that makes them untouchable. But here's what they do have. They understand how power actually works. And I'm not talking about the fairy tale version we're sold about meritocracy and hard work paying off. I'm talking about the real mechanics of influence, leverage, and control that operate behind closed doors while the rest of us are busy following the rules they wrote. And here's the thing that's going to piss some people off. One guy with no money, no connections, and no Ivy League degree figured this out and used it to gain power over some of the most influential people on the planet. He didn't do it through innovation or brilliance. He did it by recognizing that elite power structures have a fatal weakness, and that weakness is the elites themselves. Now, before you click away thinking this is just another conspiracy video, let me be clear about what we're actually going to cover here. This isn't about worshipping some mastermind or glorifying manipulation. This is about understanding the actual playbook that was used, stripping away the sensationalism, and recognizing the patterns that exist in every power structure you'll ever encounter. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The same strategies that allowed one person to infiltrate and control elite circles are being used right now in your industry, your company, maybe even your friend group. The scale is different, but the mechanics are identical. And if you don't understand how this works, you're vulnerable to it. But if you do understand it, you can protect yourself, recognize it when it's happening, and maybe even use some of these principles ethically to advance your own life. Here's what makes this story so valuable to study. It's a masterclass in strategic relationship building that went horrifically wrong. Strip away the crimes, and what you're left with is someone who understood social dynamics, information leverage, and network effects better than almost anyone in modern history. He turned parent-teacher conferences into job interviews. He converted academic conferences into billionaire matchmaking services. He transformed personal relationships into professional assets, and vice versa. And the crazy part? None of this required genius-level intellect or special talents. It required shamelessness, consistency, and a willingness to see opportunities where others saw boundaries. So the question we're going to answer today isn't just, how did this happen? It's, what can we learn from this that's actually applicable to our own lives without becoming monsters in the process?